Okay, MAC 504 students, this actually will turn out to be the last of the 4 recordings. I actually thought it would originally be 5 recordings, but this will turn out to be the last of the recordings on full pro forma valuation. We may have a couple more recordings. We'll probably have one more later on debt financing and 1 or 2 other things. But these are the main recordings. As I stated in the email, we usually do this in 1 to 1.5 classes. So even though these have taken a degree of time, the time actually adds up to about 1.5 classes. And the advantage of doing it like this is that you get a chance, even though I talk a lot, I've noticed I talk a lot, you get a chance to go back and see where the formulas are, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we don't have a chance to do that in class. But anyway, let's get started. And you'll notice that this one is called Completing the Valuation. So this one actually is the final calculation of our stock price that we're going to have for applied materials. And this one is actually going to use both all the numbers that we had for the income statement and balance sheet from the last video, because as in all the other videos, this is just a continuation video, okay? And also, we're actually going to use the basic valuation that you did 3 videos ago. Okay, so anyway, let's get started. And I'm going to go through. The calculations aren't that long this time, but they can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to try to go through the tricky parts very slowly. And there's more implied theory in these than in some of the more mechanical things that go into the financial statements. Okay, so let's start. Now, a lot of this is going to be based on the concept of free cash flows. Okay, and so as you know from class at free cash flows, a lot of the calculation involves depreciation and capital expenditures. Okay, so let's start here. And the first thing that we have to do is I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be based on 3 small tables. Okay, so the first table I'm going to call schedule. I'm going to try to not to put my arms while I type in front of the microphone. I'm starting to figure out that's why sometimes my voice disappears. But Dell should do a better job of placing the microphone then. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to call this schedule of assets. And you could really call it schedule of fixed assets. And what I'm going to do in this schedule of assets is I'm going to go ahead and actually pro forma. I'm going to predict what both my gross assets and my accumulated depreciation will be 5 years, for the next 5 years. And the reason I'm doing that is because keep in mind that those 2 numbers, purchases of gross assets and accumulated depreciation, are the base numbers, are what you calculate capital expenditures from and depreciation expense from. And both those are the key, are some of the most important parts to the calculation of any level of free cash flow. Okay, so anyway, let's get started here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write in my depreciation expense. Here you go. I'm going to write in my depreciation expense. Okay, and as always, depreciation expense is going to come from your statement of cash flows. Okay, so we're going to come out here to the statement of cash flows, and it's way out here. And our depreciation expense, I hope that equal sign didn't fall off there, is $363. Okay, now that was my depreciation expense for my base year of 2019. I'm not going to mark that. I'm just going to kind of let you remember that. Okay, so my depreciation expense for 2019 was $363. Okay, now what I'm going to do, and this is one of the tricky parts, is I'm going to put my depreciation expense over my gross assets at the end of 2019. Okay, and so I'm just going to write in here gross assets. These are not net assets. These are gross assets. The cost of your assets. I keep writing C there. Anyway, so these are your gross assets. Okay, and the I want to point out that you're going to have to go to a footnote for these, because the income statement, what I'm saying, the balance sheet that we used only gave you net property, plant, and equipment. By the way, this is, when I say gross assets, I mean gross property, plant, and equipment. They only gave you the net number. So we've got to find some footnote, some schedule somewhere in this rather large worksheet where you can get both gross assets and the accumulated depreciation. And what I'm going to do, just so that we have a number that we can mark off with, I will be going to that sheet in a second. And oops, there's a hint right there. Okay, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my gross assets here. But just to sort of put a notation, I'm also going to go to that sheet, and I'm just going to mark it out here is just to sort of as a marker, because we're going to need it later. I'm also going to pull accumulated depreciation from that sheet. Okay, so anyway, let's start with our gross assets. Okay, and our gross assets, we're going to have to go to some worksheet, and it seems like it's an eternity out to the right. That's why they give you these sheets, because the schedules on the right have a lot of the subsidiary schedules and detail for the financial statements. Okay, so we're going to have to go all the way over here, and I think it's like, I don't know, it's like 100 out or something like that. But you know, like I said, when you do this, as we finish the course here, you're going to have to link everything, because that's how it's done. Okay, and let's see. I think it's all the way out. It's like the second worksheet, or maybe there's a third one that says balance. Okay, so you got balance sheet detail inventory, balance sheet detail other current assets, and now you have balance sheet detail property, plant, and equipment. Okay, so if you remember, on the balance sheet, the net property, plant, and equipment was 1529. Okay, so, but this gives you the detail. The gross assets, the gross property, plant, and equipment is equal to 4071, and the accumulated depreciation is 2542. Now this seems kind of tedious, but the first number I'm going to take out is, the first number I'm going to make this equal to is, there's your gross assets. And the gross assets, if you go up here, are linked to that worksheet. And now, this is not part of a formal schedule, but we're going to need the numbers sooner or later, so I might as well go ahead and sort of mark it so that I don't have to go back to that sheet 100 sheets away when I get to a more complex situation. Okay, so my accumulated depreciation, and you just saw that. Now I'm going to go out here again. This is the last time I really had to do this. These numbers are always, these numbers and interest expense, a lot of times are in some sheet way out to the right. Okay, so notice we keep going, and you'll notice we actually pass a table that gives you balance sheet detail, but you really need to go to the detail of the account itself. Okay, so if we come out here, let's see, all these derivatives, they probably lost a lot of money in derivatives. Okay, anyway, so what we've got here is our balance sheet detail property, plant, and equipment, and I just want to mark the accumulated depreciation, which is 2542. So our gross assets are 4071, and against that they're deducting 2542. And just to sort of reiterate the point, if you go up here, those two numbers, the net of those two, should equal 1529, which is the number they gave you in that sheet way off to the right anyway. Okay, so anyway, so we've got our depreciation expense and gross assets. Now the next number I'm going to calculate is, I'm going to call it my depreciation rate. And this is just you could say this is a rough depreciation for this year, and maybe for a lot of years. It just applies for this year. You could probably use an average number for a bunch of years, but I'm just going to use the depreciation rate for 1 year. And what I'm going to do to get this depreciation rate is I'm just going to take my depreciation expense and divide it by my gross assets. Okay, and this is going to be an incredibly important number for working into the calculation of free cash flows. Apparently, this company is depreciating assets at a rate of about 9% each year. Okay, and that's going to be very important because they're depreciating 9% each year. That means it takes them 10 years to consume or their property, plant, and equipment to get it down to on an average rate. This is they have a 10-year life in their property, plant, and equipment. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to use these three numbers here, especially the depreciation rate, to put together my schedule of assets. I know I wrote it up here, but this is really my schedule of assets will be here. These numbers all come in the schedule of assets. Or I'll just do this. Okay, so I'm going to make a table based on these numbers here, which summarizes and which tries to project out into the future years what my property, plant, and equipment will be, my gross property, plant, and equipment, and what my accumulated depreciation will be, and then we'll get into the free cash flow. Okay, so let's write in here gross assets. This is a table. Gross assets, and you've got to be very careful with the formulas in here. I'll try to go slow through this one. Okay, and then we'll go minus accumulated depreciation. Let's put AD there for accumulated depreciation. Okay, and what we're going to try to do here is, and might as well put net assets here. Net assets here, a very important number. Okay, and you'll have to bear with me on this one because sometimes the formulas in these can be very tricky, and I'll have to work around a little bit. It depends on the format of the statements a lot of times too, where they have pluses and minuses. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and bring down, because we're sort of losing track of them, but let's go ahead and bring down the years, just so that we know where to keep track. Just so we'll keep track of these years for our predicted gross assets. Okay, so these are the years that we're trying to predict what our gross assets will be, and we're also trying to predict what our accumulated depreciation will be, and of course the net assets. Now here's a hint: the net assets are already predicted up on the balance sheet. We'll do that in a second. Okay, anyway, so let's start here, and we already know, and this is why I picked a number off, we already know that our gross assets for 2019 from the footnote is 4071. Okay, so our gross assets for our base year is 4071. We already know that our accumulated depreciation, and this is why I marked it, so I wouldn't have to go back to the sheet, for 2019 is 2452, and I picked that off. You go over here, and I picked that off the footnote, 100 sheets to the right or whatever it seems to be. Okay, and I'm not going to be pretty about this. They're all monetary amounts, obviously. Okay, and we know that our net assets is equal to gross assets minus accumulated depreciation. So there's our net assets. Excuse me, what am I saying? In a sense, I forget that's it's negative there. So our gross assets are equal to 4071 plus 254. So our gross assets are 1529. What am I saying? Our net assets are 1529. So if you take the gross assets of 4071, which is that number, pulled off the footnote, the supplement sheet, then our accumulated depreciation, which I just marked over here, is also off that footnote. The net of the two is 1529. Now, I just want to go up here. That's your net assets. I want to go up here and make sure that that 1529 is equal to the net assets that we have on our balance sheet up here, and there it is. Okay, so that 1529 should equal, and very important, the net assets that were shown on the original statements. Those are the original statements. So all the numbers so far seem to, I hate to use the word jive, but they seem to jive at this point. Okay, so now let's go ahead and work out and see how we go about predicting what the gross assets will be for the next 5 years and what the accumulated depreciation will be for the next 5 years. And keep in mind the purpose we're doing it. When you purchase gross assets each one of these years, those are capital expenditures that will go into the calculation of free cash flow. And as you record accumulated depreciation, the increase in accumulated depreciation is going to be your depreciation expense. And then those will give you your net assets. Okay, the next step, we're kind of going to work backwards here, and it becomes, by working backwards, we're actually, in a sense, doing the type of calculation you do when you do a statement of cash flows and do all the calculations through the property, plant, equipment, and accumulated depreciation accounts. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to make the net assets for the years 2020 through 2024. We're going to make those, we're just going to make those equal to the net assets that we have here on the balance sheet, which is 1636 for the year 2020, and I'm just going to copy those down. So I'm going to copy those down. 2024 is a little bit hidden there because I'm actually decided to put the Camtasia stuff up here. See how the audio runs. Okay, and so we know what the net assets are. We know what the gross assets are just from the financial statements themselves. And now what we've got to do is we have to compute or estimate what the accumulated depreciation will be for the next 5 years. And basically, once we do that, we just have to add the net assets and accumulated depreciation, and we'll end up with our gross assets. Okay, so let's do this. Accumulated depreciation. Okay, so the accumulated depreciation for any year should be equal to last year's accumulated depreciation plus your depreciation expense for the current year. Okay, now be very careful with this formula. I'm going to try to be very careful, but let's go ahead and see what we can do here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start, this is going to be accumulated depreciation for the year 2020. We're going to start with the accumulated depreciation for the prior year, which is that number right there. Then we're going to add to that, and we're going to put it in parentheses. We're going to add to that the product of our beginning gross assets. Just a minute. Actually, because it's a negative, we're going to subtract that because we're working with a negative. Negative times a negative is really positive. So we're adding really because that 2542 is a negative. So we're going to start with 2542 and subtract from that, but we're really adding it because there's two negative numbers there. The product of last year's or this year's beginning gross assets, or the gross assets, this year's beginning gross assets times the depreciation rate for the company. So what we're doing is saying our accumulated depreciation is, number one, is our beginning accumulated depreciation, which is at 2524, which is C75, plus our depreciation expense for the year, which is gross assets times that depreciation rate. And let's see what our new accumulated depreciation is. There it is, our accumulated depreciation for this year, and that's what I have on my worksheet here, is 2905, so things look good. Okay, but let's be very, very careful with this. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is, since we want to freeze this number here, we want to freeze that depreciation rate, because I'm going to go ahead and copy this out. Okay, and this is going to be tricky. Is what I'm going to do very carefully is I'm going to go ahead, and this part you should know, I'm going to freeze that depreciation number right there by putting dollar signs in front of the B and in front of the 71. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, and these are not necessarily going to be correct initially, what I'm going to do is copy, just a minute. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this out here. And you'll notice that it's the same number. Okay, but what I have to do now is it's the same number because there's nothing in the gross asset cells right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take take this base year of 2020. I'm going to add these two numbers together, and then that'll give you my base year for my gross assets for 2020. And then when I copy that, all the numbers are going to change so that you'll get the correct accumulated depreciation numbers. Okay, so let's see. So this, you got to be careful with this one. Okay, so let's just say that this will be equal to, keep in mind that there's a negative number in there. So if you take this cell D76 minus cell D75, and keep in mind I'm really adding the numbers because I'm subtracting a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive, you should get those numbers there. And that looks pretty good. So far I'm on with my worksheet, obviously using a worksheet here. So our gross assets predicted for year 2020 are 4541. Okay, now in order to, and you'll notice now that these numbers have changed and they're kind of all the same, but in order to get those right, the only thing you have to do now is copy this number over, and then you're going to get the correct numbers. Okay, so in a sense, what we did was we started with our net assets, making those equal to what you had up on the balance sheet, and then we computed the accumulated depreciation, and by adding backwards, we computed our gross assets. And the way we're computing our gross asset purchases, this is very similar to the calculations we did for the statement of cash flows. Anyway, that's a big step right there. Okay, so let me just go over this. They're depreciating about 10% a year. I picked up these two numbers from this one from the statement of cash flows, this from that sheet way out there. I also picked up the original accumulated depreciation number for 2019 on that worksheet way out there. It's about 102 tabs to the right out there, but that's the way it is. That's reality. Okay, I've got my dates from up on top. All these numbers here are equal to, you're noticing they're equal to 43, row 43 across the board. That's my net assets up on the balance sheet. So that's where I started with. Then I computed, and I'll leave this up for a second. Then I computed my accumulated depreciation. The accumulated depreciation is it's equal to this number, the first, let's see what we got here. I don't want to touch that. Okay, but it's equal to C75, which is the accumulated depreciation, plus if you look at the numbers in parentheses, I'm taking cell C74, which is that number right there, and multiplying it times my depreciation rate. That, in essence, is my depreciation expense. So what I'm doing is taking the original accumulated depreciation and adding my depreciation expense to that. So I'm getting an increasingly negative accumulated depreciation. Okay, so anyway, so that's probably the hardest part to this. And the next part is, there's some tricky parts, but that's usually the trickiest part, especially this formula right here. I'm sure I'm going to get some questions on that, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Okay, so that's the first table. Keep in mind we're going to have three tables, one which you're already familiar with. But let's start now. We're working toward a valuation. Let's start with a free cash flow calculation. So we're going to start with a free cash flow calculation. And as you know, free cash flow, a lot of it is based on the comparison between capital expenditures and depreciation expense. And, just as you may be able to guess that your depreciation expense are the differences between all these accumulated depreciation numbers, and your capital expenditures are the differences between all these gross asset numbers. We're assuming that they're going out and buying gross assets. Okay, and so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it kind of like the slightly changed depreciation, free cash flow calculation that I did in the basic calculation in the first video. So I want to start here with operating income. And we're just going to pull that from our income statement up on top. Operating income. We're going to take out our provision for taxes. Apostrophe there. Okay, and then that, like I did for the basic valuation sheet, which is over here to the left a little bit, like I did for that one, I'm using a slightly different calculation for free cash flow because this is free cash flow to the firm. It's the cash flow all your assets produce, and this is a very rough calculation, but it's for to pay interest and dividends. This is a very rudimentary calculation. There's more precise ways to do this, but I'm just staying with this because of these videos. Things simple in these videos. Okay, but these two together will basically give you your income with interest expense added back, but less your taxes. So in any case, this is your operating income net of taxes. That's what it says. Okay, the rest of these are normal items. Now, I'm going to put in items that usually have in a statement of statement of cash flows or a free cash flow calculation. But and this is all statement of cash flow stuff. But I'm going to separate out. I'm not going to put everything into one working capital line. I'm going to separate out the change. I'm going to go minus the changes minus change in CA in your current assets. And keep in mind, the reason I have the minus in there is because in the statement of cash flows, the current assets have an opposite impact on the cash flows. But I'm keeping them separate because I want to point out, I want to emphasize some mistake people always do on these things is some people just take the total current assets line, and that's fine. That line includes cash. Remember, you got to keep cash out of here. Anything that resembles a statement of cash flows, keep cash out of there because that's your bottom line number. We're not going to do that as full statement of cash flows here, but you should keep cash out. So I'm going to say here, I'm just going to say no cash, or I'm going to say not include cash. Terrible English, but I'll tell you, it's good to know because I have so many people always make the mistake. They'll just say, well, we have a change in current assets, and they'll go up to this top, they'll go up to the balance sheet and just do the total current asset line. That includes cash. So keep it out of there. Okay, but then we're going to have plus our change in current liabilities. Okay, so which is the usual stuff. So there's your change in working capital, those two things. And then we're going to have, as you could have guessed, plus our depreciation expense. And then we're going to take out our capital expenditures. I'll just call it CapEx. Take our capital expenditures. And this will be a very, very, very rough estimate of free cash flow to the firm. All sorts of things you can actually do with it. Okay, so there's what we got. So this is going to be our estimate of free cash flow to the firm, which we'll use, as you know, to do a two-stage valuation. Okay, so let's start with all these things. Operating income. Operating income, all you've got to do is go up to the income statement, because we use the same format. We use the same format as the company. Just go up to the income statement, and you will see that we have operating income is right here. I shorten these up, but that's your operating income is line 20 right here. Yeah, it is line 20. That's your operating income. Okay, line 20 in this video. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy that over. So your operating income is simply from your income statement. Now, your provision for taxes is also going to be from your income statement. Okay, and so your provision for taxes is going to be equal to, and I forgot if there's a minus sign up there. I don't think there is. I don't think they include any plus or minus signs. So your provision for taxes, we're just going to go up and get our provision for income taxes from our pro forma income statement. Your provision for taxes in this example is on line 24. So we're going to take out our provision for taxes and we'll just copy it over. So that's easy enough. Okay, now we get to a slightly tricky part. Okay, and let's keep the years in mind here. Okay, and this is really the last tricky part of all this, is we got to subtract out the change in current assets. We've got to take out and then add back the change in current liabilities. Now, the change in current assets, usually you could just take the total current asset line and take 1 year's difference and subtract out the last year's difference. And that would give you the change in current assets. However, in this case, the only thing we can, or what we have to is we can't do that because the total line, the total current asset line on the balance sheet includes cash. So we're going to have to do some sort of summing of things. Okay, so this is going to be the opposite effect. So our change in current assets, we're actually going to take the 2019 numbers and subtract the 202 numbers, the 220 numbers, and that will give us the negative. That'll give us the opposite effect. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the sum of all our current assets except cash. So we're going to go up here and we're going to take the sum of all our current assets except cash for 2029. So, and that is going to be, for 2029, we're going to do short-term investments, accounts receivable, inventories, and other current assets. So we're going to take the sum of that and subtract out the sum of the current assets, of those same current assets for the year 2020. Okay. And I want to emphasize that I'm not taking the total current asset line, which we can do for current liabilities, because you don't want to include cash in there. So make sure that you find some way to, when you take the change in current assets, don't include cash. I will be sending your sheet right back if you do, because that would be like making a statement of cash flows and including cash in the, okay, so let's see what we get. Hopefully we'll get a number which matches my worksheet. If not, I'm not going to stop this video. I will figure it out. Okay, so we got negative 495, and woohoo, that equals my worksheet. Okay, but keep in mind I took the 2019 numbers for assets. I took the 2019 numbers and subtracted the 202, the 220 numbers, the 2020 numbers, and that gets me the negative effect. I did it in reverse effect. So all I'm going to do is copy that over 2024, and does that match my worksheet? It most certainly does. Okay, so now the rest of these are fairly easy because they're just differences. Change in current liabilities. The change in current liabilities, remember that on a statement of cash flows, the current liabilities always go, and the adjustment of current liabilities goes in the same direction as the change in the current liabilities. So in this case, we're going to take the 2020 total current liability line and subtract out the 2019 to get my initial change in current liabilities. So this is going to be equal to, we're just going to go up to total current liabilities. That's right there. It's the 52, line 52 on this sheet. I had to cut these off to get this thing to print out and do all sorts of things. So anyway, they're 4716, and that's my total current liabilities. That's the line for total current liabilities. And I'm going to subtract out from that the total current liabilities for the previous year, which is 2019, and that'll give me the change in total current liabilities for the year 2020, and 269 does match my number. So far we're right on course here. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy that number over. Okay, and I'm going to match my numbers to the worksheet that I'm using here. Make sure that I'm going in the general right direction. It's not a perfect worksheet, but I'm serving it as using it as a guide. Okay, so far what we've got here is operating income minus provision for income tax. That kind of gives you your income inclusive of interest less your taxes. Okay, then you've got your change in current assets. Make sure not to include cash, so you can't just take the sum line. Okay, you can take the sum line for current liabilities. That's what I've done. And notice that more or less we've got an income which is dominating all the other items, but we haven't looked at the capital expenditures yet. Okay, now depreciation expense. These next two items are not too hard, I believe. Let's see, but anyway, our depreciation expense is going to be the difference between the accumulated depreciation for 1 year and the accumulated depreciation for the previous year. Okay, so let's see what we get if we take, let's do this. Our depreciation expense for 2020 should be equal to the 2020 accumulated depreciation minus the 2019 accumulated depreciation, and that gives you 363. That's a negative, but we ought to add it back, so be careful. So let's do this. Let's put parentheses around that and put a negative in front of that, so we get a positive 363. Okay, and so it basically is the difference between this number and this number, adjusted for the fact that they're both negative. So it's the 2020 accumulated depreciation less the 2019 accumulated depreciation, and it's adjusted for negatives. Okay, the next number, okay, and now all I've got to do is copy those out, and that will give me my depreciation expense, my estimated depreciation expense for the next 3 years, which is about starts at 363, 569, seems reasonable enough. It's at a rate of that, I think 9% we had originally. Now my capital expenditures are the difference between the gross assets for 1 year and the ending gross assets for 1 year and the beginning gross assets for the same year, because you're purchasing assets. So we're going to take the 2020 gross assets minus the 2019 gross assets, and those should give me capital expenditures of 470. Now, remember that in a free cash flow calculation or a statement of cash flows, capital expenditures are subtracted in the investing section of the statement of cash flows. So let's make sure to make that negative. So it is a difference between those two numbers, but let's make it negative. So we're going to make that negative there. Okay, and so supposedly we bought $470 million or whatever the denomination is, probably at 470 million of capital expenditures. And all I'm going to do now is subtract out the remainder of these numbers, and there are your capital expenditures. Now let's go ahead and get our free cash flow calculation, and then we're ready to kind of finish this thing up. Well, we finish this pretty quickly. It's sort of non-dramatic. But anyway, so we've got, that's our calculation, and we're just going to go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and sum these numbers up. I could obviously press the button, but I like putting in the equation for you. Okay, sum these numbers up, and we get free cash flow for the first year of, it's not matching my sheet here, which I'm finding disturbing. We get free cash flow for the first year of 2649, which is, well, you know, if it's right, it's right, of 2649. And then we're going to go out here and see what we get for free cash flow right there. Okay, so we start with a free cash flow of 2649, and we end up with, that's actually correct, my sheet is wrong, so I'm on the right track here. Okay, so we have free cash flow of 2649, that won't matter in the end, 2649, 2834, 3033, 3245, and 3472 in the end. And this company, its operating income is high, and even after taking out for taxes, it seems like they have enough. They have some free cash flow. They have some free cash flow either because we've already considered the reinvestment part, so this is free cash flow. They can either pay interest or dividends or even buy back stock. And as you've seen, I'm just going to make this point again. It seems to me go back to treasury stock, they've been buying back a lot of stock. So if you were really to take this model out, you might start thinking, well, we're going to have to adjust this flat treasury stock number because this company loves to buy back stock. But we're not going to do that now. Those are the types of things you can do with these models, though. Okay, so anyway, so they do have some free cash flow, and apparently they love to buy back stock with it. Okay, they guess they have nothing better to invest it in. Okay, so anyway, so that's your free cash flow. Okay, and I'm going to try to leave the years up here. I won't be able to, but there's your free cash flow for 2020. All right, our projected is 2649, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so I'm gonna bring it down here. I will bring back the years. Okay, now we're ready. So now we're ready to do our final valuation. And this is why I like doing a basic valuation first and then doing a full pro forma valuation. Because what we can do to do our final valuation is just to take the basic valuation from this sheet over here. We're going to cut and paste the titles and everything and just fill in some of the numbers, and it kind of works out. We'll have to fill in a couple numbers, but it kind of works itself out. So anyway, so these 5 years here, 2020 through 2024, going back to ancient history, it seems, are super growth period. And what we're going to do is bring over the basic calculation, calculate the value for the super growth period, and the numbers beneath it are going to be we're going to make some adjustments, but they're going to kind of wash out and become the terminal growth period. But the format is already there. Okay, so let's go down here. And these are our free cash flow estimates for 2020 through 2024. Okay, the firm does have some free cash flow. Apparently loves to buy back stock with it. Okay, and what I'm going to do, you can be careful with this step, but it's not, just put the cursor there. And let's go back to the basic calculation. And here's what I'm going to do. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take this whole format here that I did for my basic calculation. I'm going to take the whole format, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy. I'm not going to copy these percentages here or these percentages here, but I'm going to start with the row that says period cash flows and the factors. I'm just going to take this entire format here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that down. I'm going to copy it over to the pro forma calculation just underneath my free cash flow calculation. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that into here. Now the numbers you can see are nonsense. Okay, however, what we're going to do is rather than doing what we did last time or what we did the basic calculation, we just assumed that the cash flows grew at 7% without any real detail. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these cash flows for each one of these years, and I'm going to write in the years here just to keep you informed. This one is 2020. This one is 2021. This one is 2022. This one is 2023. This one is 2024. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the cash flows for those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down into the cash flows column here in this thing here. So cash flows for 2020 were 2649. Make sure to copy them because it's growing at 7%. Okay, then we've got 2384. Obviously, you could do transpose and all that, but I'm just trying to do this so that you can. This is for understanding, not for doing it fast. 3033 for 2023, then 3245 for 2020. That's 2023, and finally for 2024, it's going to be 3472. Okay, and so just by doing that, and we're still using the same factors. I want to see something here. B21. Okay, B21. Either got very lucky or no. Okay, well, we're going to be using, let's see. Yeah, we're still using a factor of 0.04. I don't know where I'm getting that from, but, and we're still raising that. Okay, and so we're still discounting this at 4%. Okay, and I'm wondering very quickly where that's coming from. I'm going to change that very quickly here. I want to make sure that this turns out. Okay, what's troubling me here is it seems right. It seems fairly right, but just so what's troubling me here is that B21, wherever that is. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put in a separate line that says factor here, just so it's more current to this calculation. And that factor is going to be equal to the factor that I have way up here, which is the cost of capital up there, just to make sure. Okay, and in this calculation here, I'm going to change this to this number here to be 87, because otherwise I have a feeling that we're going to have some bad numbers. I'll change that to be 87, and this should give you the same numbers. I was just getting a bad vibe from there. Okay, and I think it was just picking up one of the percentages on the income statement. So anyway, so what we've got here is our cash flows are each equal to each one of these cash flows. There's 2020, there's 2021 right there, equal to E85. There's 2023 right there, equal to 3033. There's 2024 equal to 3245, and there's 3472 equal to 2024. Okay, and now my discount factor is based on, I know I can get the equation out, but I'm sort of shy about changing anything. So it's, what we're doing here is this is discounted. This is a discount factor. It's 1 over 1 plus B87, which is 4%, raised to these years right here. Okay, so this is raised to C90, raised to C91, which is squared, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That gives us our correct free cash flows right there. Okay, and that's the present. I like doing this way because all the titles are in here. That's the present value of the super growth period. Okay, now we've got to change some things here because we copied over and it's reading different things. That's what I was afraid of in the first place. But I still like doing it this way. Now our growth factor. Now all we've got to do is fill in our correct growth rate for the constant growth period and our cost of capital. And this thing is very near completion. So our growth rate for the constant growth period, I'm sorry I didn't copy it down, but remember, if you go all the way back to the top, there it is. Our growth rate for the constant growth period is 1%, and our cost of capital for the constant growth period for the terminal period is equal to 3%. Okay, that gives you those numbers right there. Okay, our 5-year discount factor, we've got to make sure that that's equal to the 5-year factor here, and it is because I copied it over. Okay, and here we're almost finished here, and here's what we've got. Let's a drum roll here. What we've got to do is, well, let's summarize this here. So our super growth period, based on the cash flows that were derived, all these cash flows which were derived from the pro forma financial statements, our super growth period had a cash flow of present value cash flow of 13,492, and then our growth rate, and everything's linked to the top, is for the terminal growth period is 1%, 3%. So our numerator is equal to 3472 times, going to that equation, that's equal to 3472 times 1.0 times 1.01. Notice the equation here is D94, or it's D94, which is that number right there, times 1 plus C98, and C98 is our growth rate. So that would give you the 6-year cash flow. The denominator is just the difference between these two numbers here, C99 minus C98, and the The terminal value is C102 divided by C101 divided by C102, which is just these two numbers here divided by 3506 divided by 2% gives you 175,348. Then all I've got to do is take it times the fifth year discount factor. The fifth year discount factor is right here, and it's equal to E94, which is that one, which takes it all the way back to the present, because remember that this number is the value of the terminal stage at year 5. We got to take it back to the present. So the present value is this is the terminal value of the terminal stage times the 5-year discount factor. The present value of the terminal period is 144,123. So the total value of the firm, is 157,615, which is equal to, going up the equation here, it's equal to F95, which is the terminal present value of the super growth period, plus F106, which is the present value of the terminal period, and it gives you 157,615. Okay, and the only thing we've got to do is divide by the number of shares, and that should give us some type of price. So let's go ahead, and I always like to link these things. Once again, let's use the number of shares as the number of shares as let's use the basic shares in the earnings per share calculation on the income statement. Okay, and we get a price of 168.21, which is let's see, fairly close, I think. Let's see what we got here. We got a price of 176.25. So the two calculations came out fairly close, but the pro forma calculation gives you some room to maneuver, let's say. And I'm about to stop because the purpose of this video was to get this 168.21, and I think we've done that. But let's just take a look at a couple of things that you might be able to do with this that you couldn't do with a short form calculation. Let's say, for instance, I'm just going to describe one. Let's say that we go back to our point that they have free cash flow, so they've got this cash floating around. They can put it into marketable securities. That's kind of meaningless now. Interest rates are basically zero. We're going negative interest rates. These are interesting times, or they can buy back stock, do all sorts of things with it. And what I've been saying is they're apparently buying back stock. So one thing that you might be able to do in this set of financial statements is you could sort of try to calculate try to see read about their stock buyback policy, and that would affect this. That may or may not affect the final result. But another thing you can do with the way this thing is set up, and I'm just going to show you one example, is we have a share price of 168.21 here. Okay, and let's assume, this is just a hypothetical, let's just change a couple of things and see how the price changes with it. I'm going to change things on the cost side because changing things on the revenue side can be kind of tricky. Let's just go ahead though and change the costs, the percentages for a couple of the costs, and see what happens. And I'm going to change the percentages. I'm going to start with the change for cost of goods sold. And that's going to change all the numbers, and it should change the stock price here. If it works, it should change it down. If not, I'm going to give it to you anyway, and then we'll try to figure that out later. But they have cost of products sold 56. Now you're going to see all these numbers change, but this number won't change because it was calculated over here as a subtotal. But just keep that in mind. Let's say their costs all of a sudden go through the roof. And so let's say that the costs now become 70%, which would give you a gross profit of 44%. But keep in mind that this number was calculated as its own percentage of sales. That's another adjustment you could make. But keeping in mind that the gross profit, it originally was, let's do this, it was originally 56%, which made the gross profit 44%. But as I change, you'll notice as I change the cost of goods sold, the gross profit also changes. So this is really now should be in the 30% range right here. And obviously, if your cost of goods sold went up, then your share price should go down. So I just changed the percentage. and that changed my share price to $32. So if you change, one of the advantages of doing this, and there's lots of ways to do this, but you can change the percentages of certain expenses and see the impact on the share price. So if your cost of goods sold went through the roof, and which I don't know what's going to happen in the future, to be honest about it, then the value per share is $32. Okay, and then let's go back and kind of undo that. Okay, and let's say all of a sudden they decide to do a lot of marketing, and let's say their marketing expenses all of a sudden become 10%. That changed all the numbers, and that should also lower your share price to 104.76. So you can play what if analysis using this format with your expenses. Of course, we're using a 2-stage model. You could use a 3-stage model, and you could also went back to 4%. You could also, that's why I kind of like this type. So you can change the percentages, and it'll show you the impact on the stock price. Obviously, you can also do things like make pivot tables, all of that, and we'll see what we can do in the upcoming classes. But anyway, that should give you a start, along with the other 4 videos, to making these. And your assignment initially, as I stated in the email, your assignment will be to do this, and then I'm going to have you do one for another company. And then I'm going to have you do one for, and then we'll take one of those companies, throw in some leverage so you get some idea of that. And then I believe gives that your final exam is going to be that each one of you is going to end up doing a small project where we connect through one of the online programs and WebEx probably, and you give me like a 5-minute presentation on it. Okay. Anyway, and you'll send me your worksheet, and that's it. But you'll be able to work together everything else. But anyway, you'll be able to work together on this and the next 2 projects, and you'll have a final which you give me your own company. And so we'll talk about that later. And anyway, so this is the last of the videos. I'm going to throw it up on YouTube tonight, and I'll be sending you the email tomorrow morning to tell you the time. It is 12:18 on March 18th, and I hope and I wish, I'm saying, hope that everybody really takes care of themselves. I'm 62 years old. I'll be honest with you. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. So stay, more than anything else, you're very young, stay healthy, because there's no hurry. One of the things I've seen in young people is everybody's in a hurry, but you have a lot of time. Don't worry about it, okay? Because time can tell you. I love life, and I'm doing very well, and I'm going to stay indoors. But it's you have lots of time. Take care of yourself, because everybody is worth a lot. Okay, so take care of yourselves, and I'll be sending you an email tomorrow morning. Okay, so good night and good bowling. Bye bye.